there are two types of widgets in Flutter, stateless and stateful widgets. Now, you probably heard a keyword in both of those, and that's state. But what is state? State is just data, and to be a little bit more specific, it's data that can be updated or manipulated. Let's take a look at some examples. So here in the Fitbit app, we have a lot of state here, lots of data talking about how many steps, calories, all these things. The app bar, depending on the state of the app bar, which screen it is on. Up here in the top left, there's a little state of the account that you are in. Another example is Twitter. So this follow button, whether it's followed, whether it's clicked, whether it's active, that's a state. The follower numbers, all the information here, that is state. And lastly, the biggest one and easiest to understand, I think, is accounts. So which accounts you're logged in with is a state of the application. So that's state. Like I said, state is just data. It's data that can be updated and manipulated and used within the application to do stuff with the app. And Flutter has two widgets, stateless and then stateful. Stateless widgets. These are widgets that don't hold any state. Maybe it's just a static image that just displays on your screen. Maybe it's text that is displaying. Maybe it's icons that don't really change. And then we have stateful widgets. These are widgets that hold a state. A very clear example of that is a text field. When you're typing in text, that text is your state of the text field. A checkbox is another good example. It has two states. It could either be checked or not checked. Now let's jump into our demo app to showcase this in actual Flutter code. So this is a demo app that we've been seeing. This is the counter. You can increment it. And we'll notice the main widget that we have is called My App. And this is a stateless widget. It's stateless because this doesn't hold any state. It just gives us the rest of the application. But the things below it, for example, this homepage widget is actually stateful. It's stateful because it does have state, and that state is a counter. And it's this elegant, beautiful counter that we have here that does magical things. This counter is displayed, and our state can be updated using this thing called setState. So we can actually hover and read what it does. It notifies the framework that the internal state of this object has changed. The state that we're changing is we're incrementing that counter. Whenever we wrap it in a set state, we're telling our stateful widget that we want to rebuild this build method. Let me showcase something for you. So in VS Code, let's hover over the stateless part of it. This text has not changed. This is stateless. We can, if you click Control period, you can see this window pop up. And let's click Extract Widget. We can call this stateless text. Okay. So we have two widgets within there. We have the stateless text widget, and we have this text that is within a stateful widget that gets updated. So our text is stateless, and we can add a breakpoint here. What this breakpoint does is it tells you if this line of code ever runs. So when we refresh, of course, it has to run, and we see a big yellow stoppage point right here. It means this point got executed. And whenever we restart it, of course, it has to get executed because we have to display it. And then the UI is updated. But you'll notice whenever we click the plus icon, we're changing the count. Our stateless widget doesn't get touched because it doesn't have any state. Let's go back to our stateful widget. So this is the one actually holding the counter. We put a breakpoint here where the counter is, and you can put it anywhere within this build method. This whole thing gets rerun every time the state changes. Now if we increment the counter, you'll see this breakpoint gets executed, and we know that this line of code runs every time we click that button. Now within stateful widgets, we have access to some functions that allow us to execute logic either before or after the widget gets built. So specifically, there is init state. If we hover over it, init state gets called whenever this object is inserted into the widget tree. So before we actually see anything happen here, this function runs. And I can prove that to you because we can set the counter to 10 here. And we can remove all those. So if we refresh now, restart the app, you'll see the counter starts at 10. I didn't even see the 0 or anything like that because the init state executed before we even had a chance to build any UI out. There's another one called dispose. So this runs whenever the object is being removed from the tree permanently. So in this case, we're not really removing anything, but let's say we went to a different screen and we're coming back from that screen, we would run the dispose method if we needed to dispose anything. We'll be using the init state and dispose method later in the course whenever we deal with animations. So we covered what stateful and stateless widgets are and when and why you should use them. Now we're going to go over some of the most common ones to help you get acquainted with Flutter and widgets.